Welcome back, everybody, to episode 4 of Before the Commit. This week, we're going to talk about GitHub Actions with Claude Code. Some interesting news with OpenAI. They're getting into the browser war space, kind of taking a page from the recent news with Perplexity. And this week, of course, we'll cover Secure Sus. We'll talk about how you could potentially use Bash to do privilege escalation. As usual, I have my friend with me, Dustin Hillgartner here. Hey, Dustin, how's your week going?
Very good, very good. How are you?
Good.
A little bit of double audio.
Yeah, I was checking the stream just to make sure we were live. It was taking a minute for LinkedIn to start streaming us, but yeah, it all worked out.
Mm-hmm.
So this week we were kind of committed to the tool of the week being Claude Code. I know the week prior we talked about Claude Code. So we've discussed quite a bit here on the future of coding may not be in an IDE, might be outside an IDE, and this kind of concept of directing agents outside of what many developers have been using for years, which is, sitting inside of an application, writing code, essentially a Word document or word processor for editing code. I have shared, many years ago, the first IDE I ever used was Notepad, context switching between files, and then later became Front Page 98 and writing classic ASP pages. And, of course, there's been so many that have come across, whether it be Eclipse or NetBeans, IntelliJ, Visual Studio Code, VS Code. And now we're kind of at this an interesting inflection point where, maybe much of what you do may not actually, the interface for orchestrating or deciding what needs to be done may not be an IDE. There could be other inputs, could be a document, could be a conversation, could be talking to your device. So, this last week we, committed to talk about GitHub Actions and Claude Code and kind of taking it to the next step. We talked many weeks ago about cursor background agents. So I'm kind of curious, how your week has gone playing with this GitHub action. What are your kind of thoughts around it? And maybe also how it relates maybe to GitHub cursor background agents.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't really used cursor background agents much since I started using Claude Code and the GitHub Actions. I think the GitHub Actions with Claude Code, and we kind of alluded to this a little bit in the last podcast with talking about Claude Code is like an SDK and a CLI tool at the same time as, being usable within an IDE. And I know that a lot of folks, when Claude Code came out, they said, why isn't it an IDE? What is this whole CLI thing and an SDK? If it's not clear why that's powerful, it'll become clear once you see GitHub Actions. And really what it is an implementation of the SDK as a GitHub action. And so what you can do is have Claude Code wake up and do coding or do a code review or help create an issue or something like that for you from within GitHub Actions, or even outside of GitHub Actions. You can be in the IDE itself and talking with the IDE, or inside a cursor using Claude Code, for example, as I do. And you can ask Claude Code to create an issue or create a pull request or a number of other tasks. When I use background agents in Cursor, and like I said, I haven't used it recently, so it may have gotten way better. I used it in the opening days when it came out. I felt like you were sending your code off to like this virtual machine where a dev environment was set up, and that dev environment was running cursor, like literally the IDE. In fact, you could, do something like a remote desktop to see the screen of that remote machine with cursor up, right? So it seemed like much more heavy, a lot more moving parts behind the scene, at least my thought process. And then the collaboration aspect of it, the ability to seamlessly go back and forth between the coding agent working in the background and maybe you contributing a commit to clean up something that it missed, was difficult to transition back and forth. I'm sure that's gotten better, or will get better. But from the get-go, Claude Code has been seamless in that regard. So your experience might be that you create a ticket inside of GitHub. Claude Code starts working on that ticket because you've tagged it, and you will be, either prompted to create a PR yourself, or it will maybe create a PR automatically, depending on how you set it up, and then you can talk back and forth with it on the PR to make corrections. And all of this is being done in a GitHub runner behind the scenes. So it's all happening in a way that's asynchronous. So you could potentially be working as a human on many tickets, on many issues within GitHub, and behind the scenes, all these Claude Code agents are performing the tasks behind the scenes. Now, in my experience, it's very, very difficult to get something complicated to completion in a production-ready way, entirely in the background via an agent, at this point in time. However, I don't think it's entirely a question of how smart the model is, or maybe at all a question of how smart the model is. It's more about how the human sets up the table so that the game can be won by the AI in terms of completing the task. And that means not only being very detailed in your ask, but then being very detailed in your acceptance criteria, so that in order for the acceptance criteria to be finished properly, they would have had to have also completed the task that you're looking for them to complete.
Let's kind of pull on that thread there. So a human being is writing code at human pace, right? It's depending upon there's a couple different inputs that depend upon, is coding faster, meaningful, or is there like an architectural thought process that has to also be a part of that, and kind of having in your head like the lay of the land and knowing, well, I wrote this code from the beginning, or I'm picking up a piece of code from somebody else. And then, the acceptance criteria, for an engineer might be like, okay, my unit test passed or whatever. With these agents writing code at unprecedented speeds, and we've talked about context before, and like how to give context clues, and all of these like tools have different ways of kind of accomplishing that, or decomposing like large code bases into, meaningful chunks. How do you contend with the breakneck speeds at which you might start coding? Like you're now not only talking about writing, because you're now not sitting in an IDE, you're literally orchestrating maybe many projects happening, and your context switching is not, between code bases. It's really but more thinking about things from a higher level, telling the agents what to do. So how do you kind of ensure that you're not creating a bunch of technical debt or code smells, or like code that's not architecturally sound?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think that, at least in my experience, and I do believe that like we will find that, like there's always been these concepts like DDD and, continuous development and all these ideals that folks want to get to, that they typically don't accomplish entirely, but they end up somewhere on the spectrum towards it, and that's considered good enough for where we are right now as a company or in our development cycle, et cetera. And then you're kind of pushing towards those ideals, but potentially maybe never really accomplish them in their ideal. And who knows what the finish line is at all. It's just an ideal. I think that there will be those ideals still in AI coding. Maybe not the same ideals, but there will be ideals that you strive to get towards that you maybe don't entirely get towards. So I think, yes, the ideal is that the human has to do as minimal work as possible, and the AI just figures out everything, codes everything perfectly, and gives you exactly what you want. You don't have to do anything at all. And you could be at a baseball game, have a great idea, write a random drunken ticket, and the AI writes a better ticket for you and accomplishes the task better than you even thought about the edge cases, made executive decisions based on your vision as a company, et cetera, all the way to production. And you're in the baseball game and you're like, this is so good, I'm going to put it out there for our customers right now. That ideal, I think, is still somewhere in the future, potentially distant. But where you will end up on the spectrum towards that with what we have today is so advanced that the productivity you get is an explosion. Now, what that means for me is that I can do a lot of breadth type stuff I didn't do before. Before I would, maybe have 5 or 6 ideas and I pick one of how I want to do the architecture, or how I want to do this MVP or whatever. And I would, work very hard over the course of weeks to get that done. Whereas now I can explore all 5 of those either simultaneously or sequentially in the same amount of time. Now, how do you deal with the fact that you can develop so much code so quickly, and how you keep the standards high is, for me, it means that you can't go breakneck all the time. You go breakneck to some clearing in the forest where you feel like this is a good point to be at. And then you start to look behind you. What I mean is you start to look at the code that you generated, and you start to use the AI to critique your own code. So now I'm doing this in the IDE manually and et cetera, but you could imagine you'd automate these things yourself. And that's, I think, how this industry, or how this segment will evolve, is that some of the things that you're doing manually in the IDE, but still getting breakneck, awesome productivity, you'll start to automate over time, and you'll just raise higher and higher up in terms of how much of a forest view you're operating at, but still having high quality and high speeds. Right now, I feel like, in my experience, right this very moment, I can accomplish 80% of a very complicated refactor or a very complicated task. And then the last 20% or the last 10%, I jump in the IDE and I make decisions. And the analogy I think I used the other day was like, you're a party planner and you're doing thousands of parties and you've got a brand around your particular style. You're not going in and doing all 1,000 parties. You have a team that goes in and does the 90% of the party, and then you come in at the last moment and put, hey, move this table over there, move these chairs over here, redesign. You adjust at the final moment to put your polish on it. And I feel like that's where we are right now with development. That's not, I'm doing my best to be conservative in terms of like how much I hype this up. That's what you can do right now, is have that level of productivity. Now, the day when you could just be on a boat all day and it's finishing things at higher quality than your walkthrough at the last moment will polish is not there yet. But maybe is accomplishable. Maybe there's someone somewhere accomplishing it with some great acceptance criteria, some great tooling. I think it might be easier if you're doing back-end work to get your acceptance criteria to the point where you feel solid about it. Whereas if you're doing something visual, it's hard to have an acceptance criteria.
It's interesting. Something you touched on was like, the concepts of, agile. The Agile Manifesto, believe it or not, is 24 years old now. So like, It's just interesting, like that. It's been my experience being on many different teams, and we've worked together like since 2012 at many different companies, and all of them were trying to embrace agile principles, without calling out anybody specifically. I don't know that I've ever actually seen like, agile is a manifesto. You favor something. Nobody does agile. When you say you do agile, you're not doing it. Like there's no right way to do it or wrong way to do it. And part of agile is to actually challenge how you're doing it and try to continuously improve how you're doing it and come up with your own, rules about it. I saw an article the other day about, I think John Ferry posted somewhere that, the minute that you have a certification around a methodology is the minute that thing dies. And like the example was safe agile, like once you wrap like a certification around something that was never meant to be certifiable is the minute that thing dies. But just, there's a lot of things that are packed in agile. In order for agile to really work, like continuous deployment, you really need test-driven development. You need A/B testing, you need circuit breaking, you need continuous integration, you need things like BDD. Like, how do you actually do these things? And I don't know that anybody ever actually, maybe there are some companies out there that have actually been able to, and just the idea of like sprints is like based off of a human mindset.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, people have talked about like Facebook was maybe close to that at some point where, you could potentially get an idea into production very quickly. It was like move fast and break stuff. I think that also sometimes there's periods of time where that makes sense and there's periods of time where it may not make sense. There's also industries where it makes sense in more than others. I think that you end up getting down the road of like, well, now feature flags are very important because you want to turn off things that are bad ideas after they get into production. And then maybe also like staged rollouts, like it goes out to your 10% and then your 20%, there's a whole bunch of things that you can do to kind of make that more sound over time. But all of those things have costs in terms of operations and thought process and development, et cetera. And often teams will get somewhere on the spectrum towards all that and then say, okay, we strive to get there, but it's on the backlog and we have other tickets we need to get to right now. Which is, what's funny is that so many things like that, not just engineering, but other fields too, where there's an ideal. I'm sure in music, and we have a topic like that, I'm sure there's an ideal, like an artist probably can associate with this a little bit. There's an ideal you want to get to, but then when timelines and marketing and the business of it gets involved, there's pragmatism that comes in. Right? You have to be pragmatic too.
Yeah. So on that thread, I just thought of something, right? This may not be a popular thing to say. I mean, we've been writing, collectively software for over 50 years. And is tech debt really a problem in this world that we live in with agents? We've been obsessed with, trying to avoid things like creating technical debt. But like, if AI is pushing out a feature and the feature is ready to ship, and you've talked about like, staged rollouts and feature flags, is technical debt really a problem? Is that something that we should be obsessed with? Or is it like delivering capabilities to a customer more important than, premature optimization and trying to like shave nanoseconds off of delivery, when you're really like, the ultimate goal of software engineering is to deliver a capability to a customer. Now, this may not apply to like kernel level programming for your operating system. We're talking about, modern software development, delivering a web application or a desktop application or some kind of back office system to an end user.
Yeah. I mean, I've always looked at software development as like a complicated machine, a complicated car, right? And the car goes a certain speed, and there's ways that you can speed it up, but you have to sacrifice speed in the future, right? Or you have to hang an anvil off the back of the car to slow yourself down a little bit. You know what I mean? It's like this weird. It's this weird.
I don't think you
way.
slow down. I think you just stop with the anvil.
Well, the way we always used to talk about tech debt was this idea that like the sales team wants you to go faster because some client wants something now, or potential client. We'll close the deal if we get this. So they want you to cut corners in some way, where essentially what you're saying is that we can live with these cut corners to deliver it now, but we'll fix it at some point in the future. And then that future may never come because you always get on to the next thing that the sales team wants. So so that becomes tech debt. And the reason why you call it tech debt is because it usually requires some sort of time to maintain that debt. Like there's an interest you pay on the debt if you want. That's the reason why they call it debt. And that interest comes at the expense of velocity. So your team slows down because now instead of working on a feature 100% of the time, they have to spend 10% of your time making sure this corner we cut doesn't take down the whole system or break in some way. And so usually engineers want to pay down the debt. They want to go back and fix those things. Salespeople don't give a shit about it because it doesn't help the client. It's just some sort of, it's like the equivalent of like, hey, I want to take down the drywall and tape it better because, it'll just stop me from looking at that imperfection. That's how salespeople look at it. They say, well, the system works, so why do we need to do that? So it's always this struggle, and I'm kind of making characters out of it. Obviously, there's salespeople that understand tech debt sometimes. Now with AI, how you would deal with this without AI as a manager of an engineering team is you would kind of manipulate the timelines. Like instead of saying, here's what we could do, and if we cut corners, we can get it, this much faster, you would just not give the option of the unmaintainable system. You would say, hey, we're going to build it the right way the first time. Here's how much it's going to take. And maybe you'd even pad the timeline a little bit so that you can, under promise, over deliver, et cetera. And then you can, horse trade with the time. Like, oh yeah, I could maybe shave 2 weeks off of it, but you already padded it by 2 weeks. So you do that kind of stuff to manage things. And I think the salespeople appreciate that because it gives them kind of like a stable ground. They don't always feel like they can just yell at you and you'll go faster. Now with AI, how things will change, I think, is that now you can pay down debt very quickly. So it's almost like it's moved you a little bit more into the salesperson's world where it's like, like if you're accumulating debt while you're developing with AI, then either there is some crazy unrealistic expectations coming from the sales team, like you got to deliver in an hour, or, I feel like you should be able to build things the right way the first time with AI. Now, there's inadvertent tech debt where you build things what you think is the right way and it ends up not being the right way, in which case, still with AI, you can refactor and do ridiculous refactors. There are things that I do with AI that I would have never done before AI. Like develop 2 features in a branch, realize one feature is no good and it's a bad idea, regret commingling them in a branch, and just back out the whole branch and start it over again, or try to like carve out my feature into another branch to separate them. With AI, it's simple. I just go look at the branch, carve out this feature, and within moments it's done. So you can do kind of magic with branches and Git and everything like that.
It's a lot easier. It's a lot more inexpensive to experiment with ideas. Whereas like before, you as like as a CTO or a VP of engineering, you're managing a team of engineers or you're a solopreneur and you're trying to get to market or find product market fit. And you're being very cautious about what you are going to spend your time on because you're trying to maybe move really fast, and you have a small team or a finite amount of resources. Those kind of barriers to being able to be more generous and liberal are just, they're just deciding to spend more money on, compute versus, or, refining your tool set a little bit more, or adding, another capability to your agent's repertoire.
And this is what's an interesting topic is I think that the way I feel things are going to go is there's going to be engineers who use AI to be more lazy, right? Like they're going to use it lazily. Like, oh, it's doing all the work for me so that I can do less work, right? And I feel like those folks are going to have issues with AI and issues with other folks liking them using AI. I think that ultimately those folks will have to learn how to use it properly and not be lazy, because eventually these things will be dialed into where they're tracking like cost per ticket, and they'll realize that those folks are cost per line of code. Like there's a whole bunch of metrics that'll come out of this over time where you'll really get it dialed in which engineers are good with AI and which ones aren't. Like, are you producing more than on average the amount of code? Meaning there will be measurable ways of figuring out whether people are expanding the code base very quickly with junk, or spending lots of money per unit of effort, those types of things. Right now, it's kind of the Wild West. It's hard to get at those metrics on a per person basis, and you have to do some tooling, and some are better than others. But eventually, they'll have all that dialed in to the point where you'll be able to really tell who's doing more than others. But the people who are using AI to not just accelerate what they're doing, but but analyze and critique and get better. Not only are you going to get great productivity out of that, but you're going to get some really awesome code that comes out of it. Some great, solid code. And I think eventually the tools will automate all that stuff. With automated code reviews, automated security reviews, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I keep going back to is this whole concept of agile, and like how we've defined like this, like, not to say that everybody does agile the same, but like the big thing about agile was it's like, it's not waterfall. It wasn't really about what it was, or it was just that it wasn't something else. And waterfall being like this very lengthy process of defining all the requirements up front and then iterating. And like the main sort of benefit that agile kind of brought out, less about the methodology and more about what the customer could gain from it, which is you don't want the customer to wait too long to see what you have translated their requirements into something that they are eventually going to utilize. And the real kind of promise of agile methodology was that you want to validate the customer's assumptions as quickly as possible, because more often than not, what you deliver is not what they envisioned, or their vision was too narrow, and they actually had a much bigger requirement, and you couldn't actually draw that out of them because you weren't asking the right questions. So the thought is deliver something to them sooner than later. With the ability to build features really fast, does that concept go out the window? Like, should it be more that you deliver features not in 2 weeks or a week? I mean, no one's delivering features in 2 weeks. I mean, unless you are really doing what you say you're doing, but delivering features like ASAP, really doing continuous deployment, really delivering a feature, like, can you really unlock like a new level of customer satisfaction that you could never deliver before?
Well, I mean, I look at agile and waterfall as not one's good and one's bad. I look at it as like two different tools for two different things, right? I think waterfall makes more sense. You might have agile processes within waterfall, but I think a waterfall project is more like launching a rocket to the moon or something like that. It's like the moon's banging in orbit. You know where it's going to be. You can pick a date 20 years from now, and I can tell you exactly where the moon's going to be. Whereas software development projects, when you're selling to a market, whether it be business or consumers, is more like you're launching a rocket that's got to land on something that is moving in a way that's unpredictable. And you can't plan that far ahead because you don't know where it's going to be. So it's more like you want to track that object and get close to it, and you want to improvise along the way and make adjustments and have better steering, and that's why agile works in those ways, because waterfall would fail because you would inevitably get to where you wanted to go potentially if you did it right, but that place where you wanted to go is no longer where you needed to be because the object has moved and the market has moved in a different direction. Your customer has decided that's not what they want anymore, or you just got it wrong. You misunderstood what the customer wanted. So in my experience, when you're dealing with a human that you're trying to convince to use your product, or a market of, a group of humans, that you're going to want to do an agile process where you get your product into their hands as early as possible when it's valuable. And then you listen to their feedback and you grow with them. It becomes an application that they see their feedback in over time, the way someone explained it to me one time is that, when the customer guides your product over time, they start to think of it as their product. Like they put their ideas in it. They become somewhat loyal or believe they have ownership over the solution in some way because they helped create it. So that stuff is helpful over time. And the most obvious is that if you're listening to the customer, you're going to have a better opportunity of actually solving a problem for them. If you're not listening to them, if you're going in your basement and working for 20 years on something and then coming out and saying, look at this, it's amazing, chances are people are going to say, well, lots changed in the last 20 years.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I mean, I agree. I don't think there's a one size fits all for every project, but I just see the ability to do things that many people had dreamt about doing 25 years ago, like actually being able to be realized, because you just could not, in many places, without a massive amount of engineers focusing on writing tests and, making sure you have full code coverage and, whatever your acceptance criteria might be, really being able to deliver. I mean, the idea behind moving faster and delivering perhaps better quality code. I mean, I know people are arguing that a lot of the code that's generated by AI is crap. Well, I would argue that you're instructing your AI to not write good code. And you need to think better about how you're actually instructing your agents.
Until that AI physically comes on the podcast and tells me about how it's better than me and is coming up with its own ideas and building companies and
exactly
becoming successful, then I will say the AI generated code. At this point, humans are generating code using AI as a tool, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're generating crap code with the AI, then, and you say AI generates crap code, you're just shifting the blame, Now, you can say that the tool maybe is better at this than other things, and it's easier to generate good code this way or that way. There's a learning curve to it. So, I think just dismissing it and saying it generates crap code is, in the past, was kind of naive and kind of a cop-out. Right now, it's just insane because it generates great code if you use it properly now. And actually, indisputable.
Saying that you have AI that generates crap code is literally the way that people get people to comment on their LinkedIn posts. Like that is the way it's like clickbait right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of like two tribes that are like, there's a social media thing going on. There's two tribes, and there's some people that are involved in it. They're not really, they're playing to an audience, I think, in some cases. Which is fine. I mean, that's its own little business of doing that. But I think that there's folks that are trying to pragmatically figure out, like, how can this help and how can I get better at it? And then there's others that have taken a position that they're for it or against it. Me personally, I'm excited about it. Like, people say, oh, well, it's going to code. It's going to do everything that it's going to, take your job, right? Well, first off, I think at some point it'll do everything. So if you think you're safe because you're doing something else, I think that it will do that as well. But I think that, like, if someone said, hey, there's a machine that could make all the coding go away and you can just solve problems with this machine, why wouldn't I want that machine? The whole reason I got into software development in the first place was to solve problems. It wasn't to know how to write some. I didn't want to become like an elder scribe of some sort of religion, right? He's the only one who knows how to write the ancient language. Right? Like, that's
ancient language, or ancient language?
Yes, they called it COBOL back then.
So let's shift. Interesting, like how we could segue into the next segment, user noise. I was reading, this article about AI generated music and the kind of concern it's sparking within the industry. I mean, there's a lot of music generated by AI. I mean, there's producers now that have artists that aren't even human. And so, you listen to music and you're like, wow, this is like a great song. Like, I gotta go see this artist in person. And then they don't actually exist. Or, maybe it's just a digital,
they're easier to manage. Less trashed hotel rooms or
less airline flights, no PJs.
You don't have to pick out all the green M&Ms.
No overdoses. Green M&Ms. So like, there's so many sides to this story. Like, I don't know that I have heard I don't know that I would listen to a piece of music and know that it was AI generated or not. But some of go ahead. I have thoughts, but
Well, I don't want to cut you off. Take your thought.
I think the ethical concerns, the first one that jumps out at me, like, outside the article, is it truly unique work? And, like, the fact is that no musician's work is unique, because as an artist, and many years ago, I wrote music and lyrics, and I have a whole, like, collection of poetry that I hope to release one day in a book, just not to make money, just to put it out there, because it's doing no good sitting on my in my cloud account. But, like, my musical preferences and the way that I wrote music and played guitar for many years and DJ'd also and wrote digital music was shaped by the experiences that I had and the music that I listened to, the other artists. In fact, most artists will tell you who they were inspired by. No one is not inspired by another artist. They might not listen to as much because they don't want to be influenced too much. But this, like, kind of ethical concern is, like, because music is copywritten, like any intellectual property, it goes back to the things we've talked about regarding, agents or models being kind of influenced by, creative works. And now music is now, a derivative of a derivative of derivative. It's not unique. It's being created and influenced by something that's already been created. and the ethical concerns around, you know, lawsuits and, you know, this sounds like something I created and, you know, yeah.
Well, it's not my industry in terms of where I have some expertise, but I do know a lot about how AI works. And I think that just to dispel something that folks may believe that might influence their thought process here is, it's not that an AI has a copy of all of these books or this music somewhere. It's just this content is used as training materials to fine tune the weights of a neural network. Now, I won't say it's identical to how the human brain works, but it's very similar, right? In terms of how, when you listen to music, your neural network is sort of reweighting itself based on that. And that's how you learn, right? And the reason why AI works that way is because for the most part, humans mimic things they see in nature. So we tried to build a neural network like our brain, and that's, you know, in layman's terms, that's how it works. Now, if you have a PhD, there's probably more to it. So it's not like someone has a copy of your music in the LLM and it's just verbatim using your music. Now, LLMs have great memory. So you could say, tell me about this book, and it might tell you all about the book and ruin your ability to sell your book now. And maybe there's something to that. I feel like the current laws might be enough, right? Like, in other words, what stops a human from copying your music? I believe there's laws where a certain amount of the music has to be different. A certain number of the notes in a row makes you legally liable to have copied that music. And you've seen, you know, various artists get in trouble for this over the years. I think that should be applied to AI too, where if it copied a song close enough, where enough notes are in a row that it legally meets the definition, then yeah. But if it was just inspired by a song it heard and then made something very much like it, how is that any different than what artists do today, human artists? So that's where, I think, at least my initial thought process is.
I wonder if some of this is like reactionary. Like, if I can, as a person who is not doesn't have talents, can now enter into a space where the barrier to entry to becoming a profitable artist is relatively high, right? Now, some of this has been changed by, you know, the internet and SoundCloud, and, you know, they, you know, used to have to like get a CD pressed, and you'd have to have a publicist, and the barrier to entry to music has gotten lower and lower. Now there's streaming platforms, you know, like when the whole Napster thing, I mean, Napster, for what it was, really kind of revolutionized how music is distributed across the internet. And companies figured out a way how to monetize that because they didn't want the music to be, but it perhaps deeply cut into, like, rather than being able to charge $15, $20 for a CD or, you know, a cassette or whatever, you know, they now get a piece of a pie of a streaming contract. And I wonder if some of this is reactionary, like music publishers are probably feeling a little bit of concern over, like, this artist that sells out arenas, you know, that goes on tour, that, you know, that whole marketplace is perhaps drying up. And like the barrier to entry to creating really quality music and unique artists, and like to the thing that we were talking about, coding, it's like you can really kind of start exploring different genres of music that maybe haven't existed yet, like genres that, like, there's music that hasn't been created yet. Like there's music that, you know, like grunge, for example. Like grunge was a derivative of a style of music that really kind of, you know, kind of hit the airwaves and, you know, changed the musical landscape. And you've seen music evolves over time. And like, so I wonder if some of this is reactionary about, like, no, we want a piece of this. If your model is going to start scraping our original works. We want a cut of that because we're seeing the kind of writing on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't know if I really know how it's going to shake out in the short term, because a lot of it is political. A lot of it may not come down to some science. It may just come down to like how many votes somebody has. And all I can say is how I think it'll happen in the long arc of time. And I think that like it's going to be very hard to say that because something was trained on something, like the lines just get very blurred. It's much easier if you treat it like I was saying before, in terms of trying to understand it that way. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just not smart enough to really come up with an answer for how it should be done. That's why other folks who know more about it. But I think the interesting thing about AI is that it's going to make everybody feel very, or it's going to make a lot of people feel very like nervous, because it used to take a certain number of hours to get to 80% efficiency on any task or any skill set, and then the next 20% of that skill set takes the rest of your life. Well, I feel like AI can accelerate anyone to like 85%, right? And then there's all those people who are kind of in that spot of like 81, 2, 3, 4, 5, who feel cheated, working so hard to get there. And then there's people who are at 6, 7, 8, 9, or 90%, who are like, what the hell? But I think that in the long run, I think that the more time you spend on any task or any genre, the better you're going to get at it. And I think there's just going to be a new levels of learning curve, right? Everything is relative. Like if you went down into the Middle Ages, or like all the way back in ancient times, and you went into the quote unquote laboratory of the top minds, you'd see like an apple cart in there, with 4 wheels, and they'd be like, whoa, you know what I mean? So it's like now a child can put that together at like 10 years old or something like that with some toys. So I think that like you'll just take one step onto the shoulders of those folks, and you'll be building things that are so much more advanced and so much higher. There'll be a new skill set, a new learning curve, a new separating the highly skilled from the lower skilled will just be about how you're using these new tools. It's just like, when tools that helped farm crops faster came about, they said, oh, it would ruin this entire industry and everything will be, messed up. But it just changed a lot of things, but the same principles of skills and learning and getting better at things still played out. It was just a different world in some way. So I think it'll change the world in some radical ways, but then it won't change the world in a lot of ways. It'll still be, so maybe I won't be writing code anymore. Maybe I won't even be working in software engineering anymore, but I'll still be using problem solving skills. That's not going to go away. I'm still, building things. It's just that maybe the AI is writing the code for me. Maybe a robot is putting together things for me, but it's still my ideas. Like I said, until the AI comes in here and says, hey, I have a game plan, here's what I'm doing, and I'm waking up every morning and working harder than you, then at that point I'll be like, okay, this, I'm going to retire.
Steve posted in the comments, this AI generated collab with Eminem, Jelly Roll, and Post Malone got me good. You could hear it a bit once you knew, but it was a great song. I haven't heard that. I'll have to check that out. Have you?
I haven't, but what I can say is that I don't know if it was the catalyst for this segment, but I saw that AI generated song, and there was some producers on it talking about how it was pretty good, where they generated the whole pop artist and everything like that. And then I started to go down the rabbit hole of listening to other AI songs, and I was surprised. At first I thought that maybe AI wouldn't be able to generate a song because it's something that requires a little bit of understanding of, humanity, kind of like telling jokes or something like that. But it did a really good job. The song I heard another AI song, I listened to it, I was like, man, this is really good. So I was quite impressed.
So I don't know if you know this, but the background music for starting before the Commit podcast, this music here, I created a system called SoundDraw. Now, no voices or anything like this, but I created it in about 60 seconds, completely unique. There were templates with sounddraw.io I created. And I was able to create a completely digital song, and it's now the intro, outro. It gets tagged onto. We release short form videos on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn after the show is over, and we release using QSO.ai. We schedule the posts to go out daily at 11 a.m. or whatever time. And so, some of it's like, you wouldn't know that I didn't program that, using Ableton Live or something I might have used years ago. I created it in a minute, and done with it,
Yeah. I think it's not really talked a lot about that kind of synergy, right? Like they often talk about, we talk about vertical integration, like the idea of Claude and Claude code is, and we're talking about, I think you have a segment about browsers and things like that. Companies building their own browsers. It's all about vertical integration, controlling more of the stack. I feel like there's that with intelligence too. Like someone who's really super good at let's say aircraft physics. Sometimes that applies in another field. Folks have talked about this, the precision engineering it takes to build this type of product in this industry. Then you go into a different industry where they don't have precision engineering. You bring the precision engineering to that industry, and now you've turned the corner and invented some new thing that everyone doesn't have or doesn't do. I think that the opportunity for that now that we have AI is much higher, because there's going to be folks that are going to dabble in industries they would have never gone into, like software engineers building music, or us doing a podcast or something like that. We probably wouldn't have done that without AI to help us out along the way. So there's going to be all these opportunities for musicians to write a website, and website builders to make music, and etc. And I think that in the long run, that's going to produce some amazing results. Like you're going to see things that would have never happened before.
Yeah, we probably need to just start a new segment that we just talk about AI in some other field, because this has been interesting. I really want to perhaps maybe, I don't know, maybe we need to make the podcast an hour and a half. But yeah, I'm really curious about in other industries like movies. I know there's a lot of talk about, you don't need to necessarily have a actor on a set. You could buy their likeness and put them in your movie, and as long as they agree to the terms and conditions, you could have an unprecedented number of movies being produced using artificial intelligence and voiceovers, and put people in different roles that maybe they're not attuned to do. Maybe you see Harrison Ford in a I don't know, a comedy, or a comedian in a thriller, doing stunts without a stunt double, and the amount of money that they, and would you go to a movie, because of the authenticity of it? Would you go to see that movie? Would you lose your audience? Would you disenfranchise people?
Also, there are entertaining personalities and actors in the past that you've never gotten to experience because the content that they were on was too old. It's
they could be deceased.
It's not culturally significant. It doesn't, their joke doesn't hit the same way because you don't know what happened with George Bush Sr., or something like that, or just the genres, black and white movies. You're not going to watch that maybe, so you don't get introduced to that actor. The speech is different, the dialect, the generations, etc. Imagine you had legendary entertainers or actors or musicians. They're never going to die. Like they're going to be crystallized in AI, and every generation is going to have that actor. That's amazing.
Yeah.
To me.
Or people who make it too soon that we never got to see, like in, Chris Farley was always like one of my favorites, Gone Too Soon. And like, I would love to, again, this brings up like ethical, like concerns, who has the ability to decide whether or not his likeness can be reused. But I would love to see him in a comedy with somebody that's, whatever, him and David Spade, like doing another, like, Cheap 2 or something like that. I would love to see that. I miss him,
Yeah, there's ethical considerations. Like, of course, people might misuse it, but also there's a flip side to it. What sort of artist with a family doesn't want to continue earning for their family for generations to come, right? Like it becomes an asset of your grandchildren's grandchildren. Whether wealth doesn't really pass down very well usually, but you can imagine that who wouldn't want that, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting how all of that's going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, Steve is saying the Rise of the Skywalker, how they were able to put Princess Leia back in it. They had to basically conclude her character somehow, but they were able to like get her in there and kind of, kill her off, if you will. But yeah, like that's, certainly a snippet of what you could do, but full length feature movies with, I like the idea of like, taking a movie that is old and may not be like relevant to something, and then completely like a new form of redoing the movie with like modern language or modern technology. Like cell phones didn't exist in like, Casablanca, but then imagine like taking it and completely the same characters, modernizing the language, colorizing it, introducing it, and like taking a culturally significant movie and bringing it into the 21st century. I think there's just so many possibilities that you're getting my brain going with it.
But also like the culturally significant stuff to everybody has always been highly produced. Imagine the highly produced stuff on the personal level that nobody cares about except for one person, right? Because nobody would ever produce that well because there's only one customer, or maybe no customer at all. Now you can get something highly produced for yourself for free. And it's like a good example would be,
or you pay, or maybe that's a service you pay for. Like I have this unique idea for a movie that only I want to see, and maybe my friends want to see it too. And now I can go and I have the ability. It's kind of like Cameo. Like you can go to Cameo and say, I want this person to record like a 90-second snippet. I now have these likenesses. I can purchase them. And now I can go and create like a 90-minute movie. I could write the general synopsis of it. And now I have something unique that's for me. And I paid maybe, $99.99 for it or something like that, or $1,000 for a movie that I'm the audience, and I have rights to it. I can show it. I can share it with my friends. I think that's a really interesting point, is that I am the audience and I can decide what I want to see, what my preferences are.
Yeah, like you can make your own movies. Maybe movies are designed for you dynamically. Maybe games become dynamic in that way. But what really kind of keyed in on me that was something that I thought was trivial, but it kind of rang with me. I was on vacation. I was meeting some family. There was a lot of family at this kind of get together. And my mother has a bunch of sisters, and they have a photo where they're all, together in this old photo, black and white photo, and you could just throw it into Grok Imagine. Like one of the younger cousins threw it in Grok Imagine, and it just makes them like, like they're like all next to each other, and they're looking around and smiling at each other, and that was it. They just look around and smile at each other, and they were just like amazed. Like they loved the fact that it took this old photo of them and animated it, and they were like, "It looks so real. This is like exactly like what it was." So I think that like there's a lot of powerful things that you could do with that. That I think it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out.
Yeah, Grok Imagine is pretty amazing. I was stuck on VO for a minute, but the limits were kind of getting in the way. And I mean, I'm in Grok Imagine and doing all kinds of funny stuff and animating photos. And yeah, even some of the stuff like with myself, like, the dialogue stuff is not perfect, but just the animation of pictures. And I mean, it's quite incredible what you can do. And I feel like we're just at the beginning of what you can do with creating videos. I mean, these are 6-8 second videos, but I mean, it's just, it's compute really is what it is.
I still get better results with text with ChatGPT, but but man, Grok Imagine is just it's like I can type in some idea or generate some idea, and what I like is I can look at other people's stuff, see what the prompt is, modify their prompts. It's really nice in that way, and then it generates like a ridiculous amount of variations that you're just like, whoa, how did it do all this? And then I can go on my own photo gallery, and I could choose like 20 photos and send it to Grok Imagine, and all 20 go in there and animate. It's pretty incredible. All, obviously those big clusters that they built are paying off. I'm very interested in, I don't know if it's true. It's very hard to know what's true or what's not true when it comes to like things on Elon Musk, because he'll say something's coming soon, it comes later, and all this other stuff. But there's a lot of chatter on X about a Grok code coming. So I'm very interested to see that, because like I've told you, Grok to me is the smartest of all the models when I ask it very deep reasoned questions, but it sucks at coding in all the IDEs that exist today. And I wonder whether that's Grok's problem. Now, they've alluded to they're coming out a model for coding, and also like Grok Code, which I believe is an IDE, but maybe I'm wrong. But I just want to see, like, if you actually geared that model towards coding, like how good is it? Because I think it might be a Claude competitor. But yeah, Claude's still king in coding for the most part.
Cool. So we didn't get a chance to get all the way to the end of what we wanted to talk about today, but that's okay. I think this was a really interesting conversation about using AI for creative works. And we don't have an agenda. We're live. We sometimes get to things and we don't. It was really great. And I think next week, maybe we'll talk about MCP, talk about something else. We didn't get into OpenAI with their own browser. We can talk about that another time.
Hero Code. I got invited to Amazon's ID, so I'll check that out and talk about it.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, it's been great. Thanks everybody for joining. And remember, you could follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and we always post short form videos on all the major social networks. Thanks everybody. Take care.